A lot of people don't set goals because they just don't know the importance of setting goals. And my father was a great man, and he was everything to me. He was a very successful person, and he wanted me to be successful, like every parent wants their kids to be successful more than anything else in the world. But with all the good intentions, he never once asked me, "Hey son, where are your goals?" And that's something I think about all the time, because he just didn't know. And even my school, they've tried to teach me so many things when I was little, all the way from kindergarten to grade 12. I changed 14 schools, and not a single one of those schools, and I bet you all the school or schools that you've gone to, all those years between kindergarten and grade 12, not 1 hour, let's even include university years, not 1 hour in those 16, 20 years of school have been set on goal setting for probably more than 1% of us, probably not even that. And which is the most important thing. And one day I got so upset at this. I went to my kid's school and I said, I know the problem with the education system, and you guys are doing a great job at everything else, but the most important thing for success, you're not teaching these kids is goal setting. And why don't you just teach this? And the head of the school, she looked at me and she said, "You're on to something. Mr. Shahpuri, if you're such a believer in this, and I'm convinced that what you're saying is true, why don't you teach the kids this?" And I got stuck, and every single year, free of cost, I had to go teach these kids year by year in the classes they were in about goal setting. But anytime I go back to the school, I'll see random kids coming up to me and saying, "What you taught us about goal setting, that was so important." And when I was teaching these kids about goal setting, I didn't even know it was so impactful to them. They were just looking at me like I'm from some other planet. But I guess that's how kids respond when they're fascinated, or maybe they were just confused. But so many of those kids have told me that they were so impacted. And one of those kids was my daughter, and she was very upset. She was so upset that I was going to come to her school and I was going to speak there. And she's like, "One of my friends going to say everybody's going to make fun of me." And she was literally crying and crying. And even till the last minute, she's like, "Please don't go." And very few times in life has she been so desperate about me not doing something like this. And I said, "I have to do this. I've given them my word." And when she saw me presenting, and in the audience, your own kids, they're not your kids. They're just fascinated by the speaker. So to her, I was a speaker for that moment. And afterwards, she came up to me and she said, "All my friends I'm so proud of you. Everybody is so fascinated." And I don't know whether these kids are going to carry this through their life, but I do know one thing, that they're not going to be any worse off learning this stuff. They're probably going to be a whole lot better off learning this stuff from a young age. On the importance of goal setting, in 1953, there was a very important, a landmark study that done. It was called the Yale-Harvard study on goal setting. And here's how it went. In 1953, they interviewed the graduating class of Yale Business School on goal setting. And here's what they found. They found that only 3% of the graduating class had written down goals, and the other 97% did not. So year after year, they followed the surviving members of this study. And here's what they found. When they concluded this study in 1973, the 3% that had written down goals were successful overall in money terms and otherwise, more successful than the other 97% put together. And this was profound. And for any study to be peer reviewed and validated by anybody, you have to be able to reprove the study. So they started to reprove it that very year. And they went to another institution, which was Harvard, which is by all measures as good as Yale, at least in the business school. And the Harvard Business School students were studied. Now this year, they expanded the study, and they expanded it by many parameters, but one of them was that they interviewed the students, and here's what they found. 16% of them had goals, but not written. And another 3% of them had goals that were written down, thought out goals, and 84% that nor had written goals or even thought of their goals. And here's what they found. When they followed these students for another 20 years, In 1993, they concluded the study, and this is what they found. The 16% that had goals but not written down were more successful financially and otherwise than the other 84% that did not have goals. And the 3% that had written down goals were more successful than the other 97% put together. And the study was proved, and it has been reproven time and time again extraordinarily. And incidentally, they say that 3% of society is busy carrying the weight of the other 97% and pulling them along. Maybe this has something to do with it. So written down goals, that's what's so important. Now, speaking about my father wasn't aware of the importance of goal setting as an activity, but I had a friend whose father was, and I was in grade 9. I used to go to a friend's house to play all the time, and this friend of mine who was half German, half Chinese. Now in Canada there was a lot of Chinese kids that I used to be good buddies with, and I remember at his house, his mom was German. She used to make the most awesome Chinese food because it was a good eclectic blend of East meets West. And she said, "Son, why don't you stay over for dinner? We're having Chinese food, your favorite." I said, "Oh, for sure." And I called up my parents at home and I said, "I'm gonna come home a little late and I'm having food at my friend's house." And we're sitting at the table. So at the head of the table was his dad, and the other head of the table was his mom. And he's sitting, and I'm sitting at the chair next to him. On the opposite side, his sister, his younger sister, and younger still, she was sitting on the other side. And the dad asked, "Oh, son, so what about your goals?" And he pulls out a sheet of paper from his pocket and he starts reading out his goals, and he's giving his father the minimal steps or just anything that he had done on those goals that day. Now, I knew him because he didn't used to spend a lot of effort on the goals, so he'd always try to scrape by with the bare minimum. And he said, "For this goal I did this, and for this goal I did this." And his father was nice enough that he would never say, "Well, that's it," but because he saw him at least going millimeter by millimeter or inch by inch towards those goals. Because you've heard it they say by the yard it's hard, but by anything by the inch is a cinch. So he was always inching towards his goals. And then he asked his sister about the goals. And he said, "Daughter, what about your goals?" And she took out her sheet of paper and started reading them out. And the youngest daughter, who was very little, and she says, "Well, I also did something about my goals." And at that time, it seemed silly what she was saying because she had had a tea party with her bears or something. But sillier still was what I said when they asked me, when my friend's dad said, "Son, what about your goals? Do you have any goals?" And I think he was just trying to include me. And I said, "Yes, I have some goals." And I'm dead sure what I said at that time. I tried to act smart and I thought I was smart, but I'm pretty sure what I must have said at that time was probably ridiculous. Much more ridiculous than the bears and the tea time story, because I wish I knew even the single iota about goal setting, which I hadn't even learned. And I didn't learn anything about goal setting well after I even graduated university. And I went to one of the best business schools of Canada and one of the best science schools of Canada. I went to 2 different universities and I learned a great deal of things, but I didn't learn a single thing about goal setting. And I feel bad because just 1 hour would have transformed my life, because they say just a single degree of change will completely change the destination of a ship.